Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item we got for discussion tonight is a training on open meetings. Is Siobhan on?
I'm here.
And Lou's on too? Okay. I'm not turning it over to you. All right, Siobhan, I will turn it over to you.
That sounds good. Thank you so much for inviting us. We appreciate the opportunity. I think I'll probably be doing most of the talking tonight. And of course, I'll always invite Lou and Harry to chime in if they have additional thoughts or they think I've skipped something. But I'm going to be chatting with you guys and digging into some open meetings law refresher work with you tonight. So if you can take a look at the packets that you received, they're enumerated on the bottom right-hand corner. If you take a look at page 1, that's where we're going to start tonight. And I wanted to let you guys know, so I think I was invited to come talk with you guys in part because it's always good to have a little bit of a refresher and some training on the open meetings, the ins and outs of it, closed session, exempt session, the kind of the sticky areas where people can sometimes get caught up. Right. But also because we know that from a legislative perspective, there is some legislation pending right now, and it may impact whether boards need to have some open meetings training and some impacts on penalties, things like that. So what I'd like to do is we're going to dig into some of the training first. And then if we have a couple minutes at the end, if you guys have some questions about that, where the legislation is, I can give you that update at the end. But I'd really like to prioritize digging into the work if it's okay with you guys. So that's kind of where we're going to go. So I've had the pleasure of working with just about all of you. And so it's lovely to see you again. And Kent, I think, not Kent Poston. Kent, can you tell me what your last name, how to say it?
Just forget the D, Barnes.
Barnes. Okay, thank you so much. I didn't want to mess it up. And I know this will shock you, Kent, but I have some familiarity with people messing up names. So I just wanted to double check with you, but it's really nice to virtually meet you. I'm one of the attorneys over on staff at the Iowa Association of School Boards. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about open meetings, but I'll give you guys a quick background and then I'd love for you guys to kind of pair up and start digging into this and we'll kind of come back and share together as a group. So starting with that page 1, just as a refresher for you guys, when we talk about the open meetings law, there's actually 2 different chapters of the Iowa Code. Chapter 21 is the open meetings, and Chapter 22 is public records. And I like to say that if you think of them chronologically, Chapter 21, open meetings, talks about requirements for the work that the board will do and the work that the board is currently doing, like your meeting that you're having right now. And Chapter 22 for public records talks about the work that the board has already done. It's the evidence of what you've done in the past. Okay. So we're going to focus a little bit more on Chapter 21, the open meetings, because that is a little bit more where board members tend to live and your staff will have a little bit more interplay with Chapter 22, the public records, because they have to maintain them, right? And make them available when people have questions about them. So with that being said, just as a refresher for you guys, a meeting is occurring if a majority of you, so 4 or more, are talking about a topic that has to do with something that's within your policy-making authority for the district. And that doesn't just mean that the topic is specific to board policy. It actually means that anything that you guys could regulate or that you could make a decision on, that's within your authority. Okay. So a meeting is occurring when you guys are talking about something that's related to one of those topics or you're acting on it. Okay. That's kind of the bare bones, basic gist of what we talk about when we're saying, hey, there might be an open meeting. And then that triggers the notice requirements that we have. We got to let our public know that that meeting is going to take place and have a reasonable idea of what it is that's going to be discussed or acted on. And we do that through publishing an agenda like you guys did for tonight. And then also making sure that when the meeting takes place, you're staying on topic to the agenda. So let me stop there. And I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to work together. I'd love for you to kind of pair up, if you would, or work in groups of 2, maybe 3, if however it works out for you guys. But I would really love for you to go through questions 1 through 4. I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes to kind of quickly go through them as pairs, and then we're going to come back together and talk about them and see and share out to see what you guys discussed. So this is the first 4 questions. They're on page 1, and then that 4th question is at the top of page 2. So that's where we're going to go. If you guys can go ahead and work together and start talking, and then I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes and I'll check in, and then you guys let me know if you're ready before then, okay? Just checking in with you guys. How's it going? Do you need another minute?
We're good to go, Siobhan.
Okay. All right. So what intrepid group wants to start with the first question? How about that coffee question? It's 3 members of a 5-member board gather for coffee an hour before the meeting to catch up. Is a meeting occurring? Who wants to start? Kick us off with that one.
We'll go.
Excellent. Go
He
for it,
said
Bruce.
it depends on what they're talking about.
I love it. That's like a true lawyer answer. You never get a yes or a no. No, that's really good. I think you're spot on. Now, why do you say that? Why does that matter?
Well, because if they're getting together and they're talking about their grandkids, or they're talking about the Iowa game that starts at 6 o'clock tonight while we're sitting here, that would be okay. But if
Yeah.
they're talking about something that's coming up on the agenda, or one of them is lobbying the 2 others for a position or a change in position on something that you're acting outside the open.
Your audio cut out there at the last part. I got to lobbying and then I didn't hear anything more, but I'm pretty sure that you were talking about something that's within the policymaking duties of the board, right?
That would be correct.
Yeah, and you're spot on. Yeah, if you're talking about the one thing you all have in common, district business, then you have to be really mindful. Do we have a majority of our board here? And then, yep, you're probably going to be in trouble if you haven't posted notice and followed all the requirements of Chapter 21. Very good. Okay, so number 2, 1 member of a board can only attend tonight's meeting electronically. But without them, there isn't a quorum. If that member appears electronically, while the rest of the board is in person, is a meeting occurring? And if partway through the meeting they lose connection, what happens to the meeting? Who wants to tackle this one?
This is Allison. Kent Poston and I were working together. We said that yes, there's a meeting. It doesn't matter whether you're virtually or in person. When the one person's electronically, but if they lose connection and the quorum is gone, certainly the other people can continue discussion, but they can't vote on anything.
Oh, gold star. You guys are fabulous. That's spot on. Yeah. If it doesn't matter if you're in person or electronic, what matters to fulfill the open meetings requirements that we know is that you need to have a physical location for your public to be able to listen in to the meeting. Right. So you guys could all be electronic in Zoom land like Leo and Harry and I are tonight. As long as there's a physical location, like your boardroom is still open for the public to come in and listen, then you're still fulfilling the requirements for the open meetings law. So that's fine that 1 or more board members is electronic. And yeah, if they lose connection and they drop below a quorum, then they could still discuss things, but no action can take place because the meeting is basically done. So then it's really up to whether or not the board wants to continue those discussions or if they want to wait and reconvene, kind of put those remaining agenda items on a future meeting. So kind of will depend on what your board would want to do. All right, how about number 3? The board uses a shared electronic document to provide comments on the superintendent's evaluation. To protect the superintendent's privacy, access to the document is limited only to members of the board. Is a meeting occurring? Who wants to dive into this one?
This is Linda. TJ and I decided, yes, the meeting is still occurring, even though it's locked, since a secure amount of people can only get in there, that we're still having a meeting.
Yeah, this one's a sneaky one because districts love to use shared documents. And I think, so what we know from the Iowa Supreme Court from some prior rulings that they've made is that it's going to depend on the circumstances, but you got to be really watchful of this because if those comments, let's say board members are commenting on the document and then they're kind of commenting on one another's comments or they're making comments that build on one another's comments, and they're kind of close in proximity in terms of time, boy, that sure looks a whole lot like a meeting's occurring and you haven't given notice and it's not available to the public. So in that circumstance, you want to be really careful. So what we tend to kind of caution districts to consider doing, if you want to use a document like this or some setup similar to this, maybe all of the comments go to one person, let's say your board secretary, and they compile it, and that shared document then gets sent to the board members, and it can still be private as part of the evaluation process. But then the board members don't further comment on it until they're in a closed session that's been properly noticed and all of the other requirements take place. Any questions on that one? You guys are such pros. Okay, my last one, and I tried to make this one a little bit more tricky. You didn't know I would ask you to do math tonight. Well, it's not really math, it's just time. But the board has to hold their public hearings in advance of approving the district's budget. So that hearing is at 4:30 and captioned at 4:30, and to approve the school calendar at 4:45. The board has scheduled both hearings to occur consecutively, one after the other, before their board meeting begins at 5. 2 board members arrive at 4:30 for the hearings. The rest of the board arrives at 5 for the meeting. When has a meeting occurred? And Dan, I think I'll pick on you for this one.
It would be 5 o'clock, Siobhan, because you can't do
Yeah.
a public hearing without the whole board there, or a quorum of the board there.
Very good. Yeah, a meeting hasn't occurred until you have a majority of your board members present, either in person or electronically. Now, any questions about whether or not those hearings can fly when you have a minority of board members there?
This is Allison. Yeah, I did have a question because I didn't know if board quorum applies to public hearings if we're not voting on them. Obviously, if we are voting, we have to have a quorum, but I didn't know for sure whether you'd have to have a quorum just to have because it's a public hearing.
Yeah, I thank you, Allison, for the question. I put this in here because it's that time of year, right? And I will tell you, in practice, the majority of districts they convene their whole board for a hearing. Sometimes sections of the code will specify that the board has to take action as part of the public hearing, and then you need your full quorum. Sometimes it's silent, so if the board takes no action, could you have a minority of board members there that are just listening? Yeah, probably. The tough thing with that is that the whole purpose of a public hearing is for your full board, to be able to hear directly from your community on an issue that the legislature says is so important to the community that it's really, really, really vital to get feedback. And so if you only have 1 or 2 representatives there, I think that can be a little tough in terms of messaging for your community, that, you don't have the full board there to truly hear what the community has to say. So I always encourage people to structure their public hearings either right before or right after, however you want to do it, with their board meetings, so that you have a majority of board members there. All right. This next section on committees, I put in specifically because I know you amazing Davenport members love your committees. What are you up to? Like 85 committees now? Give or take? 2 or 3, maybe? There are some districts that don't use committees at all, and I know Davenport has a few. And committee work is fabulous, and it's so vital to districts that use them and love them. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background information, and then we're going to dig into some questions on committees. But essentially, just as a quick refresher, there's 2 types of committees that can exist. The first one is a standing committee, and that is what you guys are utilizing tonight, right? This is your committee of the whole meeting. So it's just all of you. And that standing committee is a committee that has been convened by the board. And the job of a standing committee is to dive deep on a particular topic or 2, research it, and provide recommendations to a board. And then they stay around. They stick around. They're kind of perennial. So this might be like a policy committee. for a district or a facilities committee. Okay, they're standing and they continue to exist throughout the year. And the other option is an ad hoc committee. Now, this might be a specialized one-off type of committee. So the district is about to go into considering a massive renovation project, okay? And they don't normally do that. So maybe they need to put together a specialized committee to dig deep and research a couple of specific topics and provide recommendations to the board. But then once those recommendations are provided and the board has enough information to make an informed decision, the committee ceases to exist. It's fulfilled its purpose. So it just has like a set end date, which is once we educate our board, then that committee is done. Okay. So those are two kind of buckets that you can put committees into. And I will say mostly districts tend to use standing committees more than ad hoc committees, but it just kind of depends on what they're doing, what good work they're focusing on. So the reason committees matter is because of their structure. So if you have a majority of board members on a committee, like your committee of the whole meeting tonight, it's your whole board, then it's subject to the open meetings law. So we've always got to be mindful of those notice requirements and all the same requirements that we use during a regular open meeting. If you don't have a majority of board members on your committee, then it may or may not be subject to the open meetings law, and it kind of depends on the circumstances. So one of the things that the Supreme Court looks at when they consider whether or not a committee is subject to the open meetings law is how many board members do you have on it, and how much power has the board given that committee. If the committee has the ability to actually take action, then that's looking a whole lot more like something that is subject to the open meetings law versus a committee that makes recommendations, but they don't get to actually make decisions. Okay. So let's discuss this in a little more detail. And I'm going to have you guys, we'll do the same process as we did before. And I won't torture you and make you get up and move to have a new partner this time, but please know that that's coming when we start digging into closed sessions. So, the foreshadowing. All right, I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes. You guys can talk. If you're done before then, please just let me know, and then we'll share back out.
Thanks, Siobhan. All right, Siobhan, I think everybody's ready.
Excellent. All right. So who wants to start us off with our first policy committee question? Your board uses a policy committee with 2 board members serving on it to review policy and recommend revisions to the board as a whole. When the committee meets, is an open meeting occurring?
Hi, Siobhan. It's Brenda. We are saying no on that one, that an open meeting has not occurred.
Okay, how come?
Only 2 board members, and it is recommending. They make recommendations. They don't make decisions.
Yeah, I think that one's probably pretty safe to say it's not. Now, let's say they only make recommendations, they don't make decisions, but as a matter of practice, every single recommendation that the policy committee sends to the board adopts without any discussion. Would that make you feel more confident or less confident?
We always have discussion. It's always at an open meeting. And we have had discussion around the board table. No, I think as long as the opportunity is there and there are fewer than 4 members, no.
Yeah, I think you're still on firm footing. Now, I will say, in my opinion, Davenport, you guys have a strong team, and you're all a bunch of chatty Cathy's, and so you like to have your good discussion, but not every board does. And it would be one thing that I would just be aware of if you get into such a lockstep with a committee, right? That every single recommendation that the committee makes, you're just, as a matter of course, you're going through your agenda almost like it's a consent agenda item. There's no discussion. Someone makes a motion, it gets approved, move on, move on, move on. That's going to look a little bit more concerning to the Supreme Court or to any Iowa court, sorry. Largely because they're going to say, well, wait a minute, are you actually doing all your substantive work, having those good discussions in a committee meeting, and you're just coming to the table to approve things? If so, then that discussion is so important. It's vital to your community to have the ability to hear it. So probably that's going to look a little more suspicious to the courts. So you just want to keep that in mind. But yes, I agree with your answer, Brenda. Very nice. All right, number 2, your board creates an ad hoc committee to investigate and recommend an option for building expansion in the district. The committee has 1 board member on it. When the committee meets, is an open meeting occurring?
No.
Right on. Largely the same reason as we discussed above. It doesn't matter if it's a standing committee or an ad hoc committee. What matters is the substance of what they're doing, how many members there are, and what authority have they been given. Okay. How about this last one? The Library Material Reconsideration Committee. Okay. They get convened to consider a request to remove materials from the school library. 1 board member serves on this committee, and the committee's role is to issue a decision on whether to remove library materials, limit them, or keep them. The committee's decision can be appealed to the superintendent. When the committee meets, is it an open meeting? What do you think?
This is Bruce. Yes, it is, because they could take action.
Yeah, I agree. I would say this is why. So for our IASB sample policies, we recommend that the reconsideration committee provide a recommendation to the superintendent, but that they don't actually take action themselves. Even though this can be appealed, they've been given decision-making authority by their board. And so I think that actually pulls it into needing to be considered an open meeting with notice requirements, and an opportunity for the community to come in and observe. So, yep, you guys are spot on with these.
Hey, Siobhan,
Any questions on that before we go on to closed sessions?
not a question, but a comment. I just want to state for the record that we use the ISB policy primer, so we trust you all are doing a good job, that we don't need to have that in depth of a discussion on it. But now that you're stating that, we'll make sure we have more of a discussion on that.
Thanks. It's I'm sure you guys are doing fine. I've seen enough of your meetings. You guys are doing great work. I'm not worried about it. I just like to put that out there as an extra caution. You know me, I'm a little bit of a worry wart over here in Des Moines, because I just don't want my districts to run afoul of anything. So, but I'm sure you guys are doing just fine. Okay, closed sessions and exempt meetings. This can be quite the tricky topic. And I will say that closed sessions tend to be where, in terms of the number of Iowa Public Information Board complaints that are made, closed sessions is usually it's the winner. Either a board the board used a closed session improperly, or while they were in closed session, they maybe discussed things that weren't the topic of that closed session. Okay, so just as a couple of brief highlights for you, when we talk about closed sessions, a closed session is actually part of your open meeting. So you convene the meeting, and then the board actually has to vote to go into a closed session. And you need to meet some certain threshold requirements of how many board members agree to go into the closed session. It has to be properly noticed on your agenda, all of that good stuff. Okay. When you go into a closed session, there are 12 reasons that are allowed by Iowa code to hold a closed session. And you may use one of those 12 reasons, but what you can't do is use one of those reasons and talk about something else in the closed session, even if it is something else that could also qualify for a closed session. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. Here's one that I like to use: student disciplinary matter. Okay. You are going to use a closed session to discuss whether to suspend or expel a student, right? Or to discuss discipline of a student that gets referred to you by the superintendent. And there are, I know this would shock you, 2 or 3 different kids involved in one incident. Okay. Can you use one closed session to discuss all of the kids at once? Probably not. Because it's supposed to be specific to the child, right? So the most proper way of structuring something like that is to use, let's say you need to talk about 3 different students, treat them as individuals, and use 3 individual closed sessions. Okay. And I bring that up as an example because I will say it's probably one that gets skipped a whole lot by districts. They'll use one closed session and say, that's good. I don't think that quite covers the intent of Chapter 21. Okay. So that's one example of using closed sessions properly. And then, of course, you guys know, if you start to, during the course of a conversation in a closed session, if the topic strays, you need to police yourselves, because you're the elected officials and you're the ones that would get into some hot water if things go wrong, right, in the closed session. So it's really important to not be shy and to just speak up if you think that your peers are getting into, they're kind of straying from their purpose a little bit. Okay. And then the last thing I just really wanted to point out when it comes to closed sessions, because we get this question a lot in our office, is who's actually allowed to be in the closed session? And the answer is very much the board that is currently elected and serving. Period. So that means if I'm a brand new board member and I was just elected in November, and I ran on a platform of thinking that, I think there's something not quite right about our facilities plan, and I'm going to go investigate it. And there was a closed session related to it last year, and I go and want those closed session minutes. No, I'm not entitled to them. I wasn't a board member at that time. Okay. Only the board that's elected and serving at that time has a right to be in that closed session and access those minutes. They can choose to invite others in. So maybe for your superintendent evaluation, you have TJ come in for part of the discussion, and then you excuse him for part of the discussion. Okay. That's a choice you can make. So you just want to be, and especially with something like that, as it's a professional courtesy to make sure that you're having that conversation with your superintendent in advance of, this is how we want to structure this evaluation process, just so that they understand and they're comfortable with it too. Okay. All right. Exempt meetings have even more narrow purposes. They really are limited to discussing strategy for matters related to collective bargaining, employees that are covered by a collective bargaining unit, and a group of employees that are not covered by a collective bargaining unit. Okay. So by strategy, I mean things like what can you offer for salary and compensation, your benefits packages, things like that. So that's the lead up to collective bargaining. That's the most commonly used basis for an exempt meeting. Another one that's kind of commonly used is, we'll say, an employee termination hearing. Teacher terminations in particular, they're exempted from Iowa code. So they just don't even qualify as a closed session. They're totally exempt. Okay, I'm going to stop talking at you. I'm going to ask you guys to get up and move and find a new partner for this last exercise. Thank you guys so much. You're such good sports. Okay, I'm going to give you same little bit, few minutes, and you guys go through questions 1 through 4 on closed session, and then we'll come back and we'll share out.
Thanks, Siobhan.
How are you guys doing? Still need a little a minute or two?
We're good, Siobhan.
Excellent. Okay, so this first one, the board is in a closed session for the superintendent's evaluation. And before leaving, a board member says, hey, while we're in here, and can we can speak openly, I'd like to talk about the lacrosse coach. I have some real concerns. How would you respond? Linda, what do you think?
I would say absolutely not. That has nothing to do with what we're doing. So unfortunately, we can't discuss that. We have to stick with our agenda.
Atta girl. That's fantastic. Yep, you're spot on. All right, the next one. Your significant other wants to know what happened in the closed session student expulsion hearing. Just tell me why the board expelled little Larry. It's all over social media. You don't have to give me every detail, just the main reasons the board had for making their decision. How would you respond?
Siobhan, I would say, honey, I'm sorry. I know I'm sleeping on the couch tonight, but you know I can't tell you that.
Excellent. Yes. Good
Siobhan?
response.
Siobhan?
Yeah.
This is Bruce. I would say, though, what you could share with your spouse for your own self-preservation would be what was voted on in the open meeting after the closed session and what was put out there in what is called the finding of fact.
Yes, I think that's absolutely perfect, Bruce. And yes, hopefully that saves you from having to sleep on the couch.
Yeah, my
But
couch is lucky. I don't want to say that.
but yeah, you can, because that's already accessible to the public, right? So you can share that information. Absolutely. Very well done. Okay, number 3, a board member approaches the president. Last night at the baseball game, Mark tripped coming up the bleachers and said, by golly, I ought to sue this district. That step is loose. I think I threw my back out. We need to go into closed session tonight so that we can discuss our approach to him. I'll make the motion. Okay, if you were the board president, how would you respond? And no, Dan, you can't answer this. So Allison and Karen, what do you guys think?
We said no, because there is not an actual legal action to be discussed. So there's no actual lawsuit that we have to worry about. And there's like no background information. And so this is not something we would need to go into closed session about. It's not an emergency.
Fantastic response. I love it. That's wonderful. And the last part was the most important, not an emergency. That means you shouldn't be having a closed session with less than 24 hours notice anyway. There isn't a good reason to go into closed session. You don't have a reason, but you definitely can't do it without proper notice. So spot on, 100%. Good job. All right. This last one, a board member catches wind that the high school principal plans to submit the resignation mid-year, and it might be due to some controversy surrounding the firing of the high school Spanish teacher. The whole community is in an uproar. The board member wants to go into closed session to hear from the superintendent what is going on. If you were board president, how would you respond? Who wants to tackle this one?
So we discussed that this would be an HR issue and it would be something that does not need to be taken up by the board.
Perfect. You're right. And really the board really shouldn't be getting into this stuff at this point, right? Because it would be so easy for them to fall into an investigative role. And that's not where the board lives. It's not the board's responsibility. And there's a whole reason why we don't have board members investigate. It's in order to preserve their neutrality so that they can serve in that fact-finding judge role later on if the superintendent brings a recommendation that someone needs to be terminated, right? If you remove your neutrality by investigating, you can't be a neutral fact finder later on. And nobody else can fill that role of judge. We need you as the judges. So that's why we say, nope, don't do that. Okay. But you're spot on with the open meetings requirements. Yeah, there's not a basis to do this. Okay, I talked briefly about exempt meetings, and I know I'm kind of running up against a clock. So I would love for us to just collectively tackle these last three questions together without the separate chat time. Okay, so we talked a little bit about exempt sessions. Remember, these are for matters of strategy, right? For going into collective bargaining season, and then also those rare occasions for like an employee termination, that is an exempt meeting. And so when you have an exempt meeting, that means that you don't have the same notice requirements and you don't have to necessarily have minutes. Now, could it be wise to still give your community some notice that you're going to meet? Yeah, especially if you're going to hold an exempt meeting either before or after an open meeting. Because boy, your community comes in for that open meeting and they're like, why are you guys still congregating? It can look suspicious. So providing a little bit of courtesy notice that an exempt meeting is going to take place can still be really valuable. And that could be something that is just like an addendum, a little note to the end of your meeting. Following adjournment, the board will stick around for an exempt meeting. Okay. All right. With that being said, question number 1, the board wants to hold an exempt session within their open meeting to discuss strategy for collective bargaining. If you were a board member, what would you do? And I know that I'm just doing this off the cuff. You guys haven't had talk time, but who wants to share out?
If I were that board member, I'd make a motion to adjourn the open meeting, because in an exempt session, you don't have to call to order.
I love it. Yes, it's such a good catch. And this is one of the nuances. An exempt meeting is truly exempt. It does not live within your open meeting. It's its own meeting. It's not a session like a closed session. It's not an agenda item. So kick it out. It should not be in your open meeting. It needs to be before it, after it, on a different day from it. Okay. So yes, I totally agree, Dan. Very good. Okay. The board has heard, and I think that might be the first time I've ever said, I totally agree, Dan.
I have you on record. I just want you to know.
Yes, you do. No, you guys are doing great work. Okay. So the board has heard from some upset parents that on multiple occasions, an elementary school teacher used a racial slur when speaking with their class. The board wants to hold an exempt meeting to discuss whether her contract should be terminated. If you were board president, how would you respond?
This is Karen. Again, this goes to HR first. They need to investigate this, and then through the superintendent, bring it to us if it's going to termination. But this is way too soon for us to get involved.
Perfect answer. Textbook answer. Yes, I agree, because you don't want to fall into that investigative role. And yeah, there might be a time and place where a recommendation comes to you, and then you guys would hold an exempt meeting. That's appropriate, right? But this isn't it. So very, very nice job. Okay. Last one, your local newspaper has a particularly dogged investigative reporter who insists that for this upcoming collective bargaining season, the reporter should be notified of all exempt meetings to discuss strategy on matters related to bargaining with district staff. The reporter has also demanded to sit in on the exempt meetings. If you were board president, how would you respond?
This is Bruce. I'd let him know when they were, and I wouldn't let him in.
Yeah, finding that balance is really hard, and it's hard for any leadership position. But I agree. I mean, it's not open to the public, and should you make an exception? Probably not, because then it kind of opens that question to, well, who else can you make an exception for, and under what circumstances? But giving them notice of when they would occur, yep, that's fine. You could choose to do that. It's not a legal requirement, but it does help with assisting your community with transparency, right? And it also helps in the moment if the board members feel comfortable saying, actually we have a process for our exempt meetings, and they're not open to the public. I can tell you the date and time of them so that you're aware that we are going to be meeting, but yep, we keep them closed to the public, and that's allowed. Some type of statement that your board members can comfortably use is pretty valuable. Okay. You guys have done a fantastic job. And as my colleagues would say the last part, the understanding meeting agendas and minutes, I'm actually going to leave that off. It's going to be your mint on the pillow. It's an opportunity for you guys to do a little bit of self-directed study at another time, and go ahead and tackle that at another time, because I just want to be mindful of the schedule that you guys have for tonight. With that being said, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and chat with you guys. And would you like a 30-second update on the legislation that's pending, or would you like for me to skip? I'm good either way.
Yes, please give an update.
Okay. So the piece of legislation that relates to open meetings and public records training and penalties is House File 2539. Okay. And basically what it does is it increases penalties for violations of the open meetings law. And the penalty increases are not small. So currently in code, board members can be assessed, and the board member gets assessed individually. It's not that the district gets assessed a fine. Okay. It's the actual elected official. Right now, board members can be assessed between $100 and $500 for a violation of the open meetings law. And that could go up to between $500 and $2,500 if it's a knowing violation. You knew that you were violating the law, but you did it anyway. Okay, that's what our current is. This piece of legislation would increase those fines. You could be assessed between $1,000 and $2,500 for any violation. And if it's a knowing violation, it's between $5,000 and $12,500 per violation. Okay. The other thing that this allows for is it's a 2 strikes and you're out. Okay. If you've ever had a prior violation, then the court, and you get a second one, the court must remove you as an elected official. Okay. It used to be that would occur only if the prior violation resulted in a monetary fine, but that's not the case anymore. It's just any prior violation. And then what you should know is that this bill, and there was also a training component for board members and elected officials. That bill passed the House, went over to the Senate. The Senate issued an amendment, okay, that removes the training component, but it keeps the penalties. So that has yet to be voted on in the Senate. If it does pass, then it would have to go back to the House for approval. So that's where it is right now. And I checked with our fabulous government relations team before this meeting, and they don't really have any insight as to whether or not this is going to move from the Senate over to the House. But that's where it is right now. There is one important exception to these penalties that you guys should just be aware of and keep in the back of your mind. And it still exists. It's gonna in the current amended form, it's survived. And that is if you get a written opinion from your legal counsel or from some other entity, like maybe the Department of, or the Iowa Public Information Board, or the Attorney General, that you're allowed to go into a closed session, and then someone files a complaint and tries to say that was wrongful, that's actually a defense to being assessed any penalties or violations, because you relied on a written opinion that was from either an official or from your legal counsel. And so I just want to point that out because that does exist. If you guys are ever in a particularly tangled or sticky situation and you're not exactly 100% certain what the best structure is for holding closed sessions to tackle that issue, just contact your attorney. Ask them to help structure it. It's probably a series of maybe 2-3 emails tops, and it's an ounce of prevention that's worth a pound of cure. So that's all I have for you guys. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? Thank you very much, Siobhan, for hanging out with us tonight. We mainly wanted to put this together because of the pending legislation, but I do want to say you all do a great job. I think we all hold each other accountable in meetings to make sure we stay on task, unlike some other people in the area. But I just wanted to make sure that we keep doing what we're doing and keep up the great work. Thank you again, Siobhan.
I really appreciate you guys and your willingness to learn. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thanks for telling me I'm right, too. I appreciate you.
Sure. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you. Next subject is 1.04 middle school transition update. I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
John is the lead on this presentation for us tonight. So, John, if you want to take it away, appreciate it.
Thank you, Superintendent. Brenda, are you going to drive? You want me to drive? All right. Well, we just wanted to give you an overview of the work that's been done really over the course of the past year as we prepare to bring our sixth graders to the middle school for the start of the 24-25 school year. The team that has done the work to this point has been broad. We've had work that's been done at the buildings with our principals and our BSATs and our staffs. We've had work that's been done through our curriculum department. We've had work that's been done through our operations department. And we still have work, obviously, that will be done between now and the start of the school year. But we're going to look at some broader categories tonight, which you see on the board right now. I also wanted to note that there is, as we had when we moved the teachers and students from our closing buildings last year, we had an implementation plan that seemed like it was about 7,000 things long. We've had a similar implementation plan for the move to the middle school schedule implementation. That's a long list, but not as long. We have over 75 items listed, and that is really ever changing because there are things that are being added as the school year goes on. And as we get things completed, obviously they are lopped off. So we have completed over 40 of the items that we identified at the beginning of the school year. But we know that as we move into kind of where the rubber meets the road now, there are going to be things that come up that we didn't foresee. So we're continually having that conversation. Just want to go through these pieces with you tonight. I also want to thank Principal Eric Johnson from Williams is here. When we get to questions, if there are any questions that anybody has from the building perspective, Eric has kindly given of his time tonight after the track meet got canceled. I would like to thank his daughter as well, 7th grade student at Walcott right now. So thank you both for being here. I'd like to talk to you and just really broadly about the professional development that's gone on, about the work that's gone into the schedule, both for our incoming 6th grade students and for our 7th and 8th grade students. Talk about staffing, talk about the logistical side of things, the transition events that have occurred and that will be occurring, and then about the communication that's gone out, along with next steps that we have coming up. In terms of the middle school concept and the professional development that's gone on, this really started last July when a team from Sudlow, along with Dr. Barney, attended an AMLE, which is American Middle Level Educators Conference in Orlando, Florida. That really got the wheels turning for the group that went there, and the work that they did there helped us as we moved into the planning phase for the professional development that's gone on throughout this year. Then in really August, until it's ongoing. I put January there for the sake of the document, but it's been ongoing. We've undertaken a lot of learning with the AEA. They've collaborated with us to provide a lot of different learning for our teachers and our staffs and our administrators. A lot of this work has been based on an AMLE document that's titled This We Believe, and it's kind of the cornerstone of the work that the AMLE believes in, kind of a sentinel work really in terms of middle level education. So we looked at the different components of the middle school philosophy and the middle school concept. And those include a focus on culture and community, focus on curriculum, instruction and assessment, and then a third strand is leadership and recognition and organization. We had 3-hour PDs in which our teams looked at the teaming process, the documentation that goes along with team meetings, and with developing a vision and goals for not only this year but for next year. We had meetings that looked at the schedule, the time. Team meetings were provided for our buildings this year, and then the work that happened at these PD sessions on our PD days, then trickled over into the team meetings where the learning occurred. So this really carried on throughout this year for our 7th and 8th grade teams, knowing that as we came into next school year, the 6th grade would need to hit the ground running. So there are some plans that I'll speak to later in the presentation about how we're going to onboard those folks. A couple of other pieces. There's a book study that was done regarding successful middle school teaming. Books were purchased through our curriculum department for our teachers and our staffs as not only a place to start the communal learning, but also as a point of reference as issues arose this year. And lastly, in May, there is a half day of PD scheduled for continued middle school work. The plan right now is to take all of the 6th grade teachers who will be coming into the buildings and have them be a part of that work at one of our 2 May dates. So that date is yet to be determined, but that is the pathway that we're going to be taking to onboard them. One of the pieces that came out of the early work and the work, this is actually from Sudlow, and it says, for example, but this is Sudlow's structure. And I know that, Eric, yours is similar to this. I'm not sure it's exactly the same, but we gave our buildings a little bit of leeway to determine what their week looked like. And this is a sample of what the team meetings look like and what the emphasis is on each day of the week. So you can see that on Mondays and on Thursdays, that's leadership and organization. That really, I mean, I don't want to read the slides for you, but it's about planning. It's about putting school-wide pieces together. It was also an opportunity for the work that I spoke of earlier with the ongoing PD amongst the teams. Tuesday and Friday were used for culture and community. One of those days at Sudlow was set for absenteeism and for behaviors. Another day later in the week was for celebrations and for communication home. And then Wednesday was the curriculum and instruction date, and this was a place where we began work on MTSS, on identifying academic concerns, looking at that data through an academic sit lens. But it will also be a place as we move forward where that is increasingly used for cross-curricular units for things that really align with the middle school philosophy. One of the tricks with the scheduling this year is that we were not only having to go to the elementary school to onboard 1 grade level, but we had to go to the elementary school and onboard for 2 different grade levels that were coming to us. So before we even got to that point, we spent probably, well, it was weeks. We spent weeks trying to figure out what the 6th grade schedule was going to look like for next year's students. Started with a schedule that was very, very similar to the 7th and 8th grade schedule. And then the thought process was, why do we have to have it this way? And how could we make this a piece that really supports students who have been in the elementary, who have some different needs than our 8th grade students, knowing that we would have to make a swing during those 3 years from an elementary-ish schedule to one that more closely mirrors and prepares our students for the high school level. So we really kept the transition pieces in mind as we had these conversations. And like I said, it started with a schedule that looked very, very similar to 7th and 8th grade schedules. And then it was Mr. Johnson who said, we don't really need to do that. There's ways for us to incorporate all the elements of the current elementary schedule into our day. Our 6th grade day doesn't need to look the exact same as our 8th grade day. So where we landed really is a hybrid. It's not a hybrid. It's more closely aligned to the elementary schedule. But our buildings are going to have the opportunity to manipulate the pieces of the schedule as they need to, based on their staffing patterns and based on the needs of their students. A couple other pieces here. There were a lot of people that worked on that initial piece in terms of landing where we landed for the 6th grade schedule. That's a place where that information went to our principals. We had very deep conversations in our intermediate principal meetings that then went to the BSATs at the buildings for input, and we really tried to accordion that in and out to make sure we landed in a spot that was appropriate for our kids. A couple other pieces that I would like to just point out on the slide itself. There are pieces listed there that are just FYI, like there was a scheduling timeline that was created, but there were also multiple pieces sent out, and this will get hit on later in the communication piece. But there was information about what building students would be going to that was communicated to parents. There were welcome slideshows sent out from each of our principals with information about the building, about contact information. There were screencasts that were sent about scheduling and the use of My App, which was new to our people. There were building visits by our principals, so our middle school principals and our middle school counselors went to the elementaries, met with different classes, both at the 5th and the 6th grade level, to ensure that the course descriptions were there for everybody to see, but also to make sure that we had a chance to answer questions about both the courses and the process for scheduling. And then verification was done in certain buildings. We're following up on that as we go. We know that in the past there have been some questions about, all right, my kid signed up for this and I didn't even know about it. We wanted to make sure that we bridged that gap as well. So there was a lot of work that was done there. I have to tip my cap to our principals. With all of the feeders that we have, we couldn't get this done in a timely manner by sending each principal to every school where they would be getting kids, if that makes sense. So, for instance, Mr. Johnson has Adams, where kids, some will go to, well, the majority now go, but Madison and Jefferson is a better example. So our intermediate principals worked very closely and did a great job of getting that information out, whether the kids were going to be quote unquote in their building or not. So I just thought that was worthy of a tip of the cap. Just so you have an idea of what the sixth grade schedule will look like, just as a broad overview. Every day there's going to be a classroom meeting, much like we have at the elementary schools right now. That's a spot where we can work on individual behaviors. We can provide information to our students as needed. But that is just going to be a place of community building for each teacher in that group of students. They will get an extended language arts and an extended math period. They will have what's the equivalent of a science and social studies period that's shorter in length. So the language arts and the math, and Ben, you might need to help, those are 9, and we'll see it on the next slide, but basically 90 minutes. Science, social studies are 40. And then we have the opportunity with the new schedule to maintain what has been the specials wheel, which has been PE for 2 terms, art and music. And then add an exploratory wheel or an ensemble onto that for our 6th grade students. So this is one of the things that was of importance to us, that we not only provided all of our students with the ability to look at those exploratory courses, but we're also able to provide the ensemble. Now, I want to be clear on this. The students who are in an ensemble will not have the opportunity to take each of the exploratory courses, but because those students meet their general music requirement through their ensemble, we were able to work out a schedule where an exploratory course could be inserted for general music during that specials wheel. So I hope, if that doesn't make sense, I can extrapolate, but if it does, that's kind of where we are at for right now, and that's how we are moving forward. The other piece that's not mentioned here, there will be a brain break that is going to be worked into the day at the elementary schools. This is called recess. Our principals were pretty adamant that they weren't sure that recess was the right way to frame this, but the brain breaks are going to be planned. And there's been talk at our most recent meetings of expanding this, knowing that our 7th and 8th grade students to some extent need that piece as well. So that was not on the slide, wanted to make sure I mentioned it. And then Brenda, if you could open that sample schedule.
Can I ask a question? Like, if you're at Creative Arts Academy at Sudlow, are 6th graders in Creative Arts Academy?
Yep.
Where would that fit in for them to
that
go?
would actually take the place of, the last time I talked to Tanya and the way that they were structured, that's going to take the place of Some of, I believe, that will have to mesh with the ensembles, and it's going to be in with that exploratory, the specials wheel a little bit. It would be the same type of an entry point for them. It's going to be a limited schedule. It won't be the full-blown schedule that the 7th and 8th graders have, but they'll be working it in that manner.
And tag, where does tag fit into that schedule?
That is what I'm going to have to get back to you on. I'll have to ask Diane about that.
Okay.
Thank you. And we can't get this open probably because it was published. Is that correct? Okay. What I would like, if you get the chance, I can also send this separately. Within that, it just shows what the schedule looks like for a two-team 6th grade level band. And you'll just need to note that the pieces that are a part of the schedule can be interchanged. They don't have to be laid out on paper the way they are, but each of those will be a part of the daily schedule.
It's in the Google Doc that you sent us. It's linked in the Google Doc that we got this afternoon
Yes.
in our email. So.
Yep. Okay, so you do have it. Thank you. And then as we look at 7th and 8th grade scheduling, they're really just wanted to make sure that you understood that this really remained unchanged for the double block of math at the 8th grade level. Algebra 1 is available, double block of language arts. Science and social studies are still just a regular class period length. 2 rotations, one's required and one is an Explorer rotation. The opportunity for world language is still there. Also should have mentioned back at the 6th grade, well, it'll come up on the next slide too, that part of the 6th grade Explorer involves a world cultures course. So it's really an exposure to world language, to world cultures, and to world geography. So that is a piece of the 6th grade offering. The world language here at the 7th and 8th grade level is both an exploratory Spanish and Spanish 1, Spanish 2. So there are multiple pathways to be involved in the world language. It is at this time only in Spanish. And then the musical ensembles that we have had will remain in place as well. That includes the opportunity to take multiple ensembles during the school year, if that makes so. Right now, a student could be a band and choir student. They will have the opportunity to be in both band and choir. So that has remained intact. And then the exploratory offerings. At the 6th grade level, the 4 are listed there. I talked about the world cultures. Brief overview of your brain, explore your brain. This really is metacognition, it's learning about learning. And it is about teaching our students to be critical thinkers. So that would be one term. World cultures would be a second. Bright futures is a third, and this involves many different aspects of health. And then build your future is the 4th. And that is really about career planning, exploring different careers. This is a really concrete place for our 6th graders to begin that work that then we plan to have matriculate to the 7th and 8th all the way up to the 12th grade so that the students have a definitive plan that they will be following. As was the case in other places, all of our 7th and 8th grade students met with counselors. Obviously, the 8th graders are moving up to the high school, so they met with the high school and the middle school counselors. The only other thing that I would like to add here is that this is the first phase of the exploratory development. We know that part of the exploratory development needs to be reincorporating hands-on activities with our students in quote-unquote dirty classrooms. As we are planning, we are looking at what different options we can offer and how those can tie into the high school courses that we offer. Like I just said with the pathways, we want to make sure that everything is leading to the next step so that our students are at a competitive advantage when they graduate. So we understand that needs to happen at an earlier age. Staffing. We followed really the same protocol that we used last year when we had to displace some teachers and then replace them in other buildings. So Jamie and the HR department did a really, really good job of getting notification out to the teachers, working with the building principals to make sure that the right people were put into the pool, I guess. And then teachers who wanted to be sixth grade teachers were given the opportunity to volunteer to go into that sixth grade pool. So I think we got 9 or 10 teachers that wanted to go that route. They then, based on seniority, got to choose where they went with the sixth grade, and then the regular process ensued in terms of filling positions. Staffing at the middle school level was based on a few different pieces, and this really was a hybrid of the elementary and the high school scheduling processes. We looked at the number of students, we looked at the ratio of students, we looked at the teaming that we needed to do, and then we looked at course selections to try and staff our buildings accordingly. So I think we landed in a very good spot in terms of how our teams will lay out. It is not absolutely perfect, but it is at a spot where principals are going to be able to schedule and do the things that they need to do. Our teachers who are moving, they are going to follow the same process for moving their classrooms that we used last year with our teachers as well. So there's going to be paid time allotted for teachers to pack up their rooms, for teachers to unpack their rooms. We've developed a schedule for moving items from building A to building B. And the other piece of that is we have already begun. We posted the positions that were remaining after the placements were made, and interviewing has begun. So we are in a pretty good spot in that regard as well. Right now, we are working on kind of solidifying with our building principals what rooms are going to be used for what. We've had an inventory that's been taken and is being tweaked in terms of what student and staff furniture is needed in our rooms and in our buildings. We are working extremely hard to make sure that our sixth graders are in a sixth grade area, our seventh graders are in a seventh grade area, and our eighth graders are in an eighth grade area. And that has been a point of emphasis. We want to make sure that we're building houses and that we are putting kids in a spot where they're with grade pure students. Now, there are going to be transition times where that is going to have to happen when we're going to exploratory classes or we're going to common areas, but we're trying to minimize that overlap as much as we possibly can. I talked about the transport of staff material. We're developing a plan both for curriculum and for technology as we move into the transition, and a lot of that information was just shared with our teachers today. There's a lot of overlap on this slide, but there was communication that went out to all three of these groups. Our parents and our students, they were sent the information that I spoke to earlier about school boundaries. There was information shared both electronically and in person with our students regarding scheduling. As I stated, there were principal visits that were set up along with counselors to introduce our students to their buildings. We are going to be busing our students to their we're going to be busing our students to their middle schools in April. So they get a chance to become acclimated and introduced to their building principals, to staff members. And then we will also be holding tours for families in correspondence with parent-teacher conferences in early May. That is correct. Yep. And there'll be a lot of moving parts there. Mr. Driscoll has very generously taken on that task, but yeah, it'll be incoming sixth graders one day, incoming seventh on a second date. That is correct. And then I spoke through what the communication plan has been with the teachers to this time as well. and really I covered this, but transition events, I spoke through what we've done in January, February. I just talked about the tours in April, May parent-teacher conferences, and then our Jump Academy will be held in August as it has been in the past. And that Jump Academy, we're planning for that, knowing that there are two different groups, same thing, of students coming in that we're going to have to meet their needs. Transition student supports, transition meetings for students with IEPs and 504s has begun, and that will be an ongoing process. We have also established last year a system for, last year was our 7th graders that were coming up through the elementaries, but this year will be for our 5th and 6th grade students to share intervention plans, to share other information that is necessary as our students matriculate to make them as successful as they can be in their new buildings. And we're also, the plan is to pass along attendance information as we have it at the end of the year, so that we can start contacting some families and so that we can start building those bridges and those relationships again, so our students can hit the ground running on the right foot for next year. And then some next steps. We need to, the work on developing extracurricular activities is going to be an important piece as we move forward. And this is not only athletically speaking, but this is in terms of clubs, this is in terms of opportunities based on student interests. We need to make sure that we're meeting our students where they're at and providing a way for them to connect with their middle school. We're working to develop different systems for providing tiered supports, knowing that the 6th grade schedule is different than the 7th and the 8th, and making sure that we're utilizing our own resources the best we can. And as I spoke about earlier, our work regarding onboarding is going to be a continual process, because we know that we're going to have teachers coming from existing buildings, but their needs are going to be a little bit different than people who we're hiring from external sources. And we're going to have other means for that come August. So we're looking at that May date, and then we're looking at scheduling time in August to really start that process in earnest as well. So with that, that was a lot. I would ask any questions you might have at this point in time. And I'd also invite Eric up.
I didn't have a question, but I did want to commend you all for the hard work you've done and say that I was really happy with the communication that you're setting up with receiving buildings for the students to come in and get acclimated with it. Really excited about the Build Your Future with the 6th graders, because I have a young person that's graduating, not quite sure what they want to do. So that's nice to have those few years to think about it. And the segregation of the grade levels with the 6th and 7th graders, it's almost they need to be coddled versus thrown in with 8th graders. So those were 3 points that I was really happy to see that are going on.
Director Beck.
Yeah, I have 2 questions actually, and I apologize if you answered these already. But first of all, thank you for this. So with the lunch and brain break, are the grades going to be mixing in their lunch periods, or is that a building by building decision depending on your space and that kind of thing?
I think it's for the most part building by building. At Williams, they will not mix for
Okay.
their grades and for their brain breaks, other than potentially passing in the hallway as they
Right.
transition going to and from.
Okay.
But I know that at Walcott currently, you have lunch with 8th grade, right? In your lunch.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know the cafes are different sizes in different places. My other question was related. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. Oh, so within, we have students of all different abilities within 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. How much mobility is there if, say, you have a student who is, way ahead in math or whatever, and is doing 8th grade level math, but they're in 6th grade, or those kinds of things? Like, how much how flexible are we with that? I know we typically accommodate people, but
Knowing ahead of time is always better. So like if I know I have kids coming in that way, it makes it so I build my master schedule so that I can align to make, but for the most part, it makes it easier because not all of 8th grade is off at one specific time necessarily, or all days when 7th grade is available or 6th grade. So there's a chance for classes to overlap, but knowing ahead of time makes it so I'll line up a 6th grade math with an 8th grade math so that there's 6th graders going to math at the same time there's 8th graders going to math or something like that.
and then my final question was, how close is this to the house concept that we've been hearing about? Like, is this pretty much it? Because I guess I don't really know the full definition of a house concept, and we've been talking about designing the buildings, to kind of meet that. So I see with this kind of separation, it seems like.
So inside of each grade, there are teams, and that's the houses. In my building, everything's got 2. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will all have 2 houses. And those, what we try and do is it's the 4 core subject areas that we try and make it so they have the same common teacher. So if I'm we use blue and gray. If I'm on blue team, then I have the same 4 core teachers. Potentially, I have a couple extras because my blue team just happens to be big in the 7th grade. But those teachers are able to meet and specifically talk about basically half of the students, instead of being like, well, I might have, her on my team and then you on another team. There are still some outliers to make it access pure. So like those kids that are in band, choir, and orchestra kind of throw a wrench in some of that stuff, but to make it so that it's not blue house is only house that gets band, choir, and orchestra kids. There's a little bit of cross teaming that has to take place, but it's a small percentage of the students that do that.
Director Kleindraw.
So they're working on a 7-period day, is that correct? 8.
In reality, it's 9, but yeah, we have a MTSS period, so it's really 9 periods, but it operates like an 8-period day.
So teachers are getting a period for teaming and a period for prep. And is that all buildings? Even Walcott? And I say that because when middle school went in before, Walcott did not, because we didn't have the kids to be able to do it. So everybody's following the same thing.
That's how we were staffed, and that's how the scheduling guidance is going out. Yes.
Okay. And just a side note, so there's 90 minutes that they're getting
For which subject?
to team and prep.
40 and 40, so
40,
it's
40.
80.
Mhm.
I'm off the subject, but let's be thinking about these elementary people who are required in their prep to do their meetings, data meetings, whatever we're calling them these days. They aren't getting that 80 minutes. Just a thought down the way. Yeah. If we have a really, really bright kid coming in, do they really need to take the 2 blocks of language arts? I mean, if they're top of the line, is there some other pathway, or are they in an accelerated language arts class, or how's that work?
There is
honors
honor
English?
strand, yes.
For
Okay.
7th and 8th grade, yeah. 6th grade is all one level, but potentially a kid could be advanced to the next grade level.
Okay. Potentially, we have some people who are teachers who are moving twice. Last year they moved because of boundaries, and this year because they're being put at the junior high. Would that be correct?
The potential's there. I have not cross-referenced those lists. I'm not sure Jamie has either. But yes, in theory, that could definitely have happened.
And potentially, are we moving like a 1st grade teacher into 6th or 7th grade?
Yes, because the buildings were tasked with, where they weren't tasked with, the least senior were removed from the elementaries. Then that was realignments were made then, and then the movement happened.
Well, I hope we don't lose teachers because of that, because that is a huge change for some people. Yep, I guess that's my question.
Director Potts.
Now we're still having accelerated math in 7th and 8th grade, which in would lead to the algebra, and we have accelerated or honors English in 7th and 8th grade. And is there 2-period blocks for that too?
Math and language arts both are.
As the language arts, the 2-period block, I'm assuming that's new for 7th and 8th.
Occurred this year.
And so what is that all language arts, or is that a block of reading and a block of language arts?
It's a combined. So there's a little bit of reading, but it's not a block and a block. It's just
Okay.
it's the new HMH curriculum.
Then the 6th grade used to be
Mhm.
a block and a block.
Mhm.
Is that going to be a block and a block?
No, it's a lot like 7th and 8th in that where's your foundational, where is this part of it, but it's not okay. We're done with our reading now. When you come back from break,
Okay.
you're going to be in your language arts now.
It's just homogenized.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. In the staffing, was part of the planning in the staffing to deal with guidance counselors and what I would think would be an increased need, since you're adding an entire new grade to the intermediate, junior high school, junior highs, middle schools.
Our counselor, excuse me, counselors were determined using the district standard, which is 1 to 300 students. So that's what that was based on.
In general, that's usually, depending on the school,
Mhm.
generally 3 or 2. In addition to that, I would think there would be a need to either, one, restore the guidance secretary to the intermediates, and or make the head secretary a 12-month position instead of the 10-month position that it is now.
I've not officially had that conversation, but I will add that to the docket.
I think it's important. I really do, especially if you're going to have a school of 700-800 junior high school kids, 3 guidance counselors. Somebody's got to take care of planning the testing, planning the standardized tests, the transfers in, the transfers out, the registrations, etc. And with a 10-month head secretary, your building's shut down in the summer. There's nobody there. And parents come in the summer to register their kids, and there's nobody there. And nobody's checking in everything that's being shipped in the summer. And I say that from experience.
Director Poston?
So for all the 6th grade positions, do you know percentage-wise how many of the 6th grade positions are being filled by current 6th grade teachers?
I don't have that right now, but I can get that.
Okay. I mean, is it majority of them, or?
I'm really not at a spot. I would have to ask Jamie for that.
We can continue to update the board with that in the Friday report.
But I know of at least, and not all of them that put themselves in that volunteer list. That was 9 or 10 teachers. I think of those 9 or 10, 7 or 8 of them, I believe, were 6th grade teachers that were moving up. So I know that to be true.
Director Potts?
I would say that we could probably anticipate in the next 2 to 3 years a lot of turnover in our intermediates, because we'll have teachers that will be there that they're elementary school teachers, and intermediate schools is not elementary school, and they're happier at elementary school. So there'll be movement, and the real bullseye will be hit when those building principals have had the opportunity to hire a significant number of teachers that want to be in middle school and junior high and like middle school and junior high school kids. There's not that many crazy people around, but you can find them.
Director Poston?
So as a building principal, what do you feel is going to be your biggest challenge starting the beginning of next year or next fall?
2/3 of my building are brand new. I mean, I know it's kind of still an open end to your open-ended question. Staffing to make sure that we, like you said, having the right people in the right positions. So we're kind of wading through that muddy waters as teachers leave the elementaries and those teachers that were placed with us go back because of return rights. So you're not really set in your teachers and who you have at this point in time. And then you're trying to acclimate kids to your procedures and your expectations and get ready for that, but then also onboard all of those new teachers at the same time to be able to answer questions when the parent asks them on unpack night, what do you do in this situation? Instead of having them stare at their face and go, I'll have to ask the principal. Just be ready to answer that question on day 2 of their contract. Good news with COVID, that kind of went away. It didn't go away, but kids have a lot less that they want to put in a locker.
All right, thank you very much. Great presentation. Very mind-blowing there. A lot of input. With that, Director Potts, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries, meeting adjourned.